So lots to discuss as we wait for the writ drop. Let's bring in our panel of parliamentary journalists. Susan Delacourt is a columnist and parliamentary bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for Presse, and John Ivison is a columnist for the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Postmedia. Let's begin with the story everybody's kind of talking about and wondering about around Parliament Hill and maybe in other parts of the country, to be fair. The timing of the writ drop. What are we hearing? And I guess in the context of what's the strategy behind the timing of a writ drop when you have a fixed election date?
Sorry, I've been kind of out of it. Is there an election?
No, apparently, but not yet.
Yeah, no, I know in my office and in the places I'm moving around, that's all we're talking about. I think, it's one of those stories that will disappear as soon as it is launched, but I guess what everybody wants to know is, what is Justin Trudeau waiting for? It's in his hands. The people inside say, we don't want to destroy our strategic advantage in having the element of surprise. Right. It's not going to be a surprise much longer. No. We know by Sunday
he's got to do it by Sunday.
They have to do it. But I think their idea is, what do we gain by staying back and just letting the others, who seem to be launching their campaigns unofficially this week as well. I also take it, I think it's less of a factor now, but I do think they were musing about going last weekend, but the storm Dorian hitting Nova Scotia, I think the Manitoba election is part of it as well. So I think they're weighing up the costs of calling it on a day where they might get some backlash for calling it.
Right. What are you hearing, Joël-Denis? What do you think?
Well, I heard the date that the Prime Minister is looking at is this Thursday on September 12th, sorry. So there's no more strategic advantage now because, as you mentioned, the date of the election has been known for 4 years. So
What?
And so there's just some juggling for the Prime Minister, whether we call it this day or next day, or what date should we launch this thing, and how we plan our campaign accordingly. And so I'm told that the Prime Minister will not follow the convention in calling it on Sunday. Usually it's a Sunday when we go to the polls, and when an election is officially called, he will move a little bit earlier. And I'm told that the earliest that it could be is this Thursday.
Okay, what do you think, John? And what about a lot of people wonder, why would an incumbent prime minister, a sitting prime minister, call it any earlier than he had to? If he thinks, I guess there are some reasons why
there
you
may
might.
be some
Stephen Harper
reasons.
called a 78-day campaign,
right?
Thinking he would have an advantage, and that didn't work.
It doesn't seem as if it's going to matter to the other parties. The Conservatives are launching on Wednesday anyway, so at this stage it's kind of academic. There may be a consideration about the Maclean's debate, which is on Thursday evening,
which the Prime Minister is not attending.
Which he's not attending, but by calling the election that day, he might deflect attention away from the other leaders. I think giving the minimum amount of publicity to the other leaders is largely what it's all about. Why they've held off for so long, why he's not taking part in these debates. This is a kind of classic front-runner strategy. It's not entirely clear he's the front runner, but I would think if you're putting money on it at the moment, you would think he was the favourite, given the concentration of the Conservative vote on the prairies. Right. In which case, their biggest worry is that he comes out and makes a gaffe and explodes their prospects. So that's why you have a short campaign and don't take part in a lot of debates.
Let's stay with the debate question. What do you think of the debate strategy? The Prime Minister, Susan, saying that I'll do the two consortium debates, and that's why we had the consortium debates, because we didn't want leaders cherry picking which ones they go to. And then he cherry picks that he's going to go to the TVA debate, but not the Maclean's debate, not the Monk debate. What do you make of that? Yeah,
I should probably declare somewhat, I don't think it's really a conflict, but my media organization is one of the hosts of the official debate. So I do think that the initial hope from the government had been that all these people who wanted to take part in or host a debate would actually bid for it and have their own. And so I personally would like more debates. I thought the last election, but there was lots more time for debate in the last election. There was 78 days, as John said. So the more debates, the better for me. I think it would have been a good idea for Trudeau to do the Monk debate. He did quite well in it last time. In fact, I remember talking to people who said, I think he won the debate at the Monk debate. But For whatever reason, probably for what John is saying, he's decided fewer the better and don't undermine my the debate commission I set up.
Right, but has he undermined the commission by taking part in the TVA debate and saying no to others? I mean, there's a reason why he wants to do the TVA debate, right?
Yes.
A massive audience in the province of Quebec where he needs more votes.
And also, it's the first one that will be taking place. The TVA debate will take place before the other organized by the commission.
It's the only major network not in
Yeah,
the consortium,
exactly.
too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're sort of giving way to what the TVA TV station is trying to achieve, which is get outside the commission's debate and organize one in itself so that you get good ratings out of it. But because the TVA debate has had some success in the past, but I expect that it will be a backlash for one reason, not because the Prime Minister will take part in 2 French debates, but only one in English. And I expect the rest of Canada not to be very happy. I think he would have avoided that situation if he had accepted one more in debate in English, so that you've got 2 in French and 2 in English, so nobody can complain about linguistic inequality. And then you've got that right now. And more so because Elizabeth May, which is, a factor in this election, has not been invited by TVA to take part in the debate. So the TVA debate will put at play Justin Trudeau, Yves-François Blanchet, the Bloc Québécois leader, Andrew Scheer,
right,
the Tory leader, and Jagmeet Singh. So a men's debate, whereas excluding the only women
right,
as leaders. So that, I think for a feminist prime minister, I think it's not a good thing.
What do you think of the debate strategy, John?
I don't blame them for it. I think that I quite like the idea of having one major debate in English and one in French, and this is the moment when the nation tunes in, and you get, a quarter of the voting population generally watch 5 minutes or so of it. To me, that makes it a real event and raises the stakes. I think when you've got too many sprinkled around, they become marginal events
And yet, most other major democracies are kind of going the other way, right? There's almost a debate a night on CNN. There are more and more debates now
but
in the UK.
They're devalued as a result, I think.
Okay, let's talk about, as we touched on, as we enter the campaign, whenever that is, Thursday or maybe Sunday.
Could have happened right now while
It
we're
could have
talking.
happened.
Yeah.
Well, somebody check. No. The Conservatives and Liberals essentially enter the campaign tied, Susan. And I guess for a lot of people wondering, given the promise of the way the Liberal government started and how high it was in the polls, why are these two parties tied going into an election campaign?
Well, in part, it's I guess it's government wears on people, and the familiarity of it. I do remember. I think all of us remember at this table in 2015, everybody was saying, "Oh, Justin Trudeau's already got a 2 majority. That this is a first term." Sometimes I like to think it's because Canadians are sporting people and we like to give everybody a chance. I think it's a sign that there was promise unfulfilled. I think a lot of the heady feeling around 2015 is kind of dissipated from the Liberals. Some of that is their own fault. Some of it is just the casualty of governing. I think Scheer has been a pretty good opposition leader. My concern, and it was also in the last campaign too, I'll just say my personal hobby horse about this is, I like it better when we have a lot of choice. I think I really don't want Canada to go down this road of polarization, where it's an either or choice on the ballot box too. So I don't mind seeing the NDP and the Greens and as many people in this race as possible, so that it isn't a two-way polarized race. I hope the election campaign is interesting in all kinds of ways, including a multiplicity of choices for people.
What do you think, Joël-Denis?
I spent a day with Mr. Trudeau in doing a sort of a tour, pre-organized tour in Quebec from Trois-Rivières to Saint-Hyacinthe to Sherbrooke 3 weeks ago. And we did a formal interview with him. And what I've noticed is that he is ready for that campaign. He spoke without notes most of the time, and that's going to be the strategy for the Liberals, have Mr. Trudeau unscripted as much as possible. There might be an opening for some mistakes, but they are willing to take that risk because they feel that that's the best way to do it. We also had Mr. Scheer for an interview at La Presse on Friday, and he seems to be also ready for that election campaign. He's been demanding one for a while, and he's getting ready, and his troops are ready in Quebec. So I think this might be the closest election we have seen in a while, and I wouldn't bet who will come out as a winner. But for now, I think the Liberals still come out with a little bit chance of winning again another mandate because of their support in Quebec and Ontario.
That's what the polls do identify for us too, John? It's a clear choice, I think, for Canadians based on what these two leaders are talking about, but also a certain division in the country, right? I mean, the Conservative numbers are bolstered by the prairies, and the Liberal numbers are bolstered in Atlantic Canada and Quebec and so on. So what does that suggest for the campaign?
Well, I wrote a book. You might
I read a book.
I read it.
But one of the theories that's kind of untested is that that Trudeau has taken the country too far to the left, and that this country was there was a consensus post-war between progressive conservatives and small c conservative liberals, and most governments have stayed within the parameters of those. Of that. Maybe the Harper government strayed from it, but even the Harper government was pretty pragmatic and bought a car company, for example. Obviously the Liberal government bought a pipeline, so they're not exempt from that either. But I think the relentless sense that if they won on the left, they would win the country, because the New Democrat vote collapsed last time, and it may well collapse again. And therefore, as long as you dominate that vote, then you win. And I think that has, even for a lot of Liberal MPs I talked to, that there's a sense that there's a huge swathe of voters in the middle, because a lot of them feel as well that the sheer Conservatives are out with that consensus too. There's an awful lot of people who feel that there's no home for them right now. And I think we saw the Angus Reid poll came out a week or so ago. Only 13% committed Liberal voters, 24% tending towards them. 25% committed Conservatives, with another 15 or so trending towards them or tending towards them. That's a very volatile electorate, and they could land anywhere. I mean, my suspicion is that a lot of those disaffected Liberals end up choosing Trudeau as the least worst option.
They get less disaffected the closer we get to the voting day.
If the Liberals do win a majority again, or even a strong minority, and turn around and say, this is a vindication of everything we've done, I find that hard to see. There's been a complete enthusiasm gap in the electorate.
Let's finish on it. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, based reading John's excellent book, I actually have been thinking a lot about what happened to blue Liberals and what happened to red Tories on the other side. And this goes to the polarization fears, and I think either leader, whoever wins, is going to have to worry about the country being governable, because people are going to be, it's going to be an angry, I think, ugly election campaign, and I worry it'll get so ugly and angry that whoever wins will find it hard to govern on the other side.
Interesting. And let's finish up. We talked blue and red. Let's talk green and orange, and finish the conversation. What's happening with the NDP and the Greens? There seems to be this little this
Not much love.
skirmish, growing sort of inside the campaign before it even starts, and that's. I think the Greens, Joël-Denis, see obviously they're seeing some advantage they can take from the NDP, and the NDP just seems to have a tough road ahead. Yeah,
and they know the NDP as a party is a politically injured party, and they want to take advantage of that. And you see it in the polls. The Green Party has made some gains in supports everywhere, and you even see that in Quebec. Imagine that. The Bloc Québécois is paying attention to what Elisabeth May is saying. And
one of the key things she's saying these days is, if we're headed for, she's saying, I spoke to her, she's saying that, we're headed for a minority parliament, so forget this strategic voting thing. Pick the choice you want. If you, it's going to be a split, going to be a bunch of different parties in parliament, and if you want to vote Green, this is the time to vote Green.
And so that means that the Green might be a factor in every region of the country. And if there is a party that will be watching for in this election, yes, the winner of the election, but also how big the support of the Green will grow during this election campaign.
What do you think, John?
I think Elizabeth May's got a very thin rope to walk on, in that as long as she talks at headline levels about climate change and the Green Party, she'll do okay, and she'll keep this coalition together. But it's a very broad coalition. That's why the slogan's not left, not right, forward together.
Right.
If she starts talking about what the Green Party in power would actually do, you start to get some of the more right-wing Greens going, forget that, we'll go to the Conservative Party. So
it's kind of it's interesting. It seems to me that Susan, that for a long time she's been talking about climate change to a sometimes audience that wasn't that excited about listening to it. Now it seems like the issues come to her. Everybody's talking about climate change and now sort of thinking, oh, Elizabeth May's been talking about this for a long time. She's the one, right?
Yeah, it definitely is her time, but I think what the other parties have been saying is, let's see whether she has the organization to match it up. And I know the other parties have been complaining, maybe rightfully or not, that this is vetting candidates, is a huge thing now in the parties because of embarrassments in years past. And the NDP was telling us, we don't even have the resources to do the kind of vetting we need. I don't think Elizabeth May's campaign has done that kind of vetting. And I think, the kind of stories we saw, I'm not saying that she's going to have a candidate who peed in a coffee mug, but I think there may be all kinds of surprises on the Green candidates. That was a big story in the last election campaign.
All right, so we wait. And we'll talk again. We'll talk again when we know. Thank you all.
Thank you.